The crystalline spires of Xandria gleamed under the light of three suns, casting prismatic reflections across the grand hall of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 1,000 worlds clustered in their designated sections, the ancient races occupying the central platforms, while newer species were relegated to the periphery. Earth's delegation sat in the farthest corner, practically in shadow, a position that reflected humanity's standing in galactic politics. Commander Alice Vega watched the proceedings from a private viewing chamber, her dark eyes narrowed in frustration. For the fifth consecutive session, Earth's petition for enhanced defensive perimeters along the Helian trade routes had been tabled without discussion. The Xandrians, with their translucent skin and six-limbed grace, barely acknowledged the human ambassador as he retreated from the speaker's podium. "They think we're harmless," Alice muttered, tapping her neural implant to close the feed. "Like some well-behaved adolescent species that can be patted on the head and ignored." Her aide, Major Rian Silas, offered a grim smile. "Perhaps that works in our favor, Commander. They've never seen humanity without the gloves on." The metaphor wasn't lost on Alice. In the centuries since Earth had joined the galactic community, human representatives had been unfailingly diplomatic, careful, and accommodating. They had hidden their military capabilities, downplayed their technological innovations, and accepted whatever scraps of respect the Council deigned to offer. The strategy had been deliberate, a way to study the political landscape before revealing humanity's true potential. But Alice sometimes wondered if they had played the role too well. "Ghost Command remains at ready status," she said, smoothing down her midnight blue uniform. The insignia, a spectral ship silhouetted against a field of stars, was deliberately nondescript. Most Council species assumed it represented some minor diplomatic security detail. None suspected it was the command center for Earth's most elite and secretive military force. "And what exactly are we ready for?" Ryan asked, echoing the question that had plagued Alice for months. The Ghost Fleet, experimental ships with advanced stealth technology and weaponry, remained hidden in asteroid fields and nebulae throughout the galaxy, awaiting activation codes that might never come. Alice turned away from the viewing port. "For whatever happens when the Council finally realizes we're not as docile as they believe." She didn't know then how soon that moment would arrive. The alert came at 03:17 Earth Standard Time. Alice was reviewing personnel files when her neural implant pulsed with an emergency override frequency. The holographic projection that materialized above her desk showed Admiral Katerina Novak, her weathered face grave. "Helion 7 Trade Station has been attacked," the Admiral said without preamble. "Current casualty estimates stand at 2,500 Earth citizens. No survivors reported." Alice felt the blood drain from her face. Helion 7 was one of the largest human trading outposts in the Orion Arm, home to families and civilian contractors. "Who?" she demanded. "A small fleet bearing markings consistent with the Draconid Consortium. 8 ships, military-grade weapons. They bypassed security protocols that should have been impossible to breach without inside information." "The Draconids are Council-affiliated," Alice said, her mind racing. "They wouldn't attack without sanction." Admiral Novak's expression hardened. "The Council is already claiming it was space pirates who stole Draconid vessels. They're refusing to investigate or allow our intelligence teams access to their security networks." "They're covering it up," Ryan said from the doorway, his face pale with shock. 2,500 civilians, and they're brushing it aside." Admiral Novak nodded grimly. "The President has authorized Order 0X. Alice felt her heart stutter. Order 0X, the contingency plan developed for precisely this scenario, when diplomatic channels failed and humanity faced an existential threat. It authorized full activation of Ghost Command with minimal oversight and maximum deniability. Earth would officially maintain its posture of diplomatic engagement, while Ghost Command conducted retaliatory operations in absolute secrecy. "Understood, Admiral," Alice said, straightening her spine. "Ghost Command is go for Order 0X. We'll commence operations immediately." After the communication ended, Alice stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of what was to come settling over her like a shroud. "You knew this day would come," Ryan said quietly. "Yes," she admitted, "but I always hoped it wouldn't." Within 12 hours, Ghost Command had fully activated. Deep in the reinforced bunkers beneath Earth's lunar base, Alice addressed her command staff, 20 of the most brilliant tactical minds humanity had to offer. The mission briefing was brutally direct: identify the true perpetrators behind the Helion 7 massacre, and deliver a response that would ensure such an attack never happened again. "We've played the role of the compliant newcomer for a century," Alice told them, her voice steady, despite the fury simmering beneath. "But that ends today. The Council believes they can slaughter our people with impunity because humans are too diplomatic, too cautious, too civilized to retaliate. They're about to learn how wrong they are." The first strike came 3 days later. A Draconid supply outpost on the edge of the Cygnus Void went dark, its communication systems failing simultaneously with its defense grid. By the time reinforcements arrived, the outpost had been systematically dismantled, munitions, destroyed data cores wiped, and propulsion components removed from all docked vessels. There were no casualties, but the message was clear: someone could penetrate Draconid defenses at will. The Council issued a statement condemning the attack, blaming the same nebulous pirates they had cited for Helion 7. Alice watched the broadcast with grim satisfaction. Let them believe their lie for now. Ghost Command's next target was a communications relay in the Eridani sector, one that intelligence had identified as crucial to coordinating the Helion 7 attack. This time, they left evident subtle markers in the destroyed systems that pointed to internal sabotage by Lyran separatists, a species that had long chafed under Council rule. "Why implicate the Lyrans?" Ryan asked, as they reviewed the operation results. "Because we need allies," Alice explained. "And the enemy of my enemy." The strategy proved effective. 3 weeks after the relay strike, Ghost Command received an encrypted transmission from Kale, a high-ranking member of the Lyran resistance. The aquatic humanoids had been fighting Council domination for generations, and they recognized the pattern in the recent attacks. "You strike without claiming credit," Kale said, when they finally met aboard a neutral freighter in the Tau Ceti system. The Lyran's translucent blue skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed his excitement. "This is not the human way. Your kind typically seeks acknowledgement." "Times change," Alice replied, studying the alien carefully. "And so do strategies." Kale's gill slits fluttered in what might have been amusement. "The Council believes you too weak to respond to Helion 7. They do not suspect these attacks are your work." "And we'd prefer to keep it that way," Ryan interjected. "At least until we've identified everyone involved in the massacre." The Lyran resistance commander nodded, sending ripples through the water in his breathing apparatus. "We can help with that, in exchange for certain technological considerations." The technological considerations turned out to be Earth's newest stealth systems advancements that would allow Lyran ships to evade Council detection. It was a high price, but the intelligence Kale offered in return was invaluable confirmation that the Helion 7 attack had been sanctioned by a faction within the Council itself, specifically the Triumvirate of Elder Races. "They call it preemptive containment," Kale explained, projecting classified Council documents. "They fear your species' potential. Humans adapt too quickly, innovate too readily. The Triumvirate believes that if left unchecked, Earth could upset the power balance they've maintained for millennia." Alice felt cold fury rise within her. "So they murdered 2,500 civilians as a warning?" "As a test," Kale corrected, "to see how you would respond. Your diplomatic passivity these past weeks has convinced them they were right that humans lack the resolve for conflict." "Then they've gravely miscalculated," Ryan said softly. The alliance with the Lyrans accelerated Ghost Command's operations. With their inside information, Alice could target specific Council facilities involved in the containment strategy while avoiding unnecessary casualties. Each strike was precise, devastating, and untraceable, or deliberately misattributed to other factions. Meanwhile, Earth's official diplomatic corps continued to press for an investigation into the Helion 7 incident, maintaining the facade of a civilization, seeking peaceful resolution through proper channels. The contrast between this public face and Ghost Command's shadow war created growing confusion within the Council. 6 months after Helion 7, the first cracks in Council unity began to show. During an emergency session, the Arcturus delegation openly accused the Triumvirate of orchestrating attacks against human settlements, violating the Charter of Civilized Contact. The Syrian Confederation followed suit, demanding an independent investigation. "The strategy is working," Admiral Novak told Alice during their secure weekly briefing. "Half the Council species now suspect the Triumvirate is conducting an unauthorized war. They're questioning whether humans are really responsible for the counterstrikes." Alice nodded, though she took little satisfaction in the political maneuvering. Every night she still saw the faces of the Helion 7 victims in her dreams' families, who had believed in humanity's peaceful integration into the galactic community, now reduced to casualty statistics. "We've identified a new target," she said, forwarding the intelligence files. "Something the Lyrans call Essence Station." Admiral Novak's expression darkened as she reviewed the data. "This is concerning. Are we certain this exists?" The Lyrans provided gravitational anomaly readings consistent with a massive artificial structure. Their intelligence suggests it's a planet-killer weapon, one the Triumvirate has been developing for decades, as a final solution for problematic species. The Admiral's jaw tightened. "And they intended to use this against Earth?" "According to our sources, Essence Station is being prepared for deployment to the Sol system. The timeline indicates activation within the next 60 days. There was a long silence as Admiral Novak absorbed the implications. Then, she straightened her decision made. "You have authorization to locate and neutralize this threat, Commander, by any means necessary." The mission to find Essence Station became Ghost Command's all-consuming focus. Lyran operatives infiltrated Council archives, while human intelligence teams analyzed stellar drift patterns and energy signatures. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a Draconid defector, who approached an Earth embassy, claiming knowledge of a secret Triumvirate project. Dr. Marcus Way, head of Ghost Command's intelligence division, was skeptical. "It could be a trap," he warned during the strategy session. "The timing is convenient. But the coordinates they provided align with our gravitational analysis," Ryan countered. "And the technical specifications match what we've pieced together from Lyran intelligence." Alice studied the holographic representation of the supposed Essence Station, a massive structure resembling a quantum-entangled gyroscope, its nested rings spinning in opposing directions around a blindingly bright core. "If this exists and can do what they claim, we don't have the luxury of hesitation," she said finally. "We need to confirm its presence and capabilities, then develop a neutralization plan." The reconnaissance mission was high risk, but essential. Alice selected Ghost Command's most advanced stealth vessel, the HSS Wraith, and a crew of 12 specialists. They would approach the coordinates in the Cygnus X1 region, perilously close to a black hole, which explained why the structure had remained hidden from conventional scans. Alice insisted on leading the mission herself, despite Admiral Novak's objections. "If this truly is a planet killer aimed at Earth, I need to see it with my own eyes," she explained. "And if it's a trap, I won't send my people into it without sharing the risk." The journey to Cygnus X1 pushed the Wraith systems to their limits. The spatial distortions near the black hole interfered with navigation, while radiation levels required constant adjustments to their shields. When they finally reached the coordinates, initial scans showed nothing unusual, just the empty void of space against the backdrop of distant stars. "Could our intelligence be wrong?" Lieutenant Kara Desai asked from the sensor station. "Adjust for gravitational lensing," Alice ordered. "The station could be visually displaced by the black hole's influence." When they recalibrated, the truth materialized before them, and it was more terrifying than the intelligence had suggested. Essence Station wasn't simply a weapons platform. It was a technological marvel the size of a small moon, with concentric rings of dark matter containment fields surrounding a core of what appeared to be artificially condensed stellar material. "It's a star fragment," Dr. Wei whispered, his face pale in the glow of the sensor readings. "They've somehow extracted and stabilized a piece of stellar core. If they can maintain quantum coherence during transport and then deliberately collapse that stability, they could trigger an artificial supernova anywhere they deploy it," Ryan finished, "including Earth orbit." The Wraith maintained observation for 48 hours, gathering data on the station's defense's crew rotations and operational patterns. The facility was heavily guarded by triumvirate vessels, with multiple redundant shield systems and automated defense platforms. "A direct assault would be suicide," Ryan concluded during their tactical review. "Even with our entire Ghost fleet, we'd be detected and neutralized before we could breach their outer defenses." Alice studied the station schematics they'd compiled. "Then we don't attack from the outside," she said slowly. "We infiltrate and destroy it from within." The plan that emerged was audacious to the point of recklessness. A small team would approach in a captured Draconid shuttle, using identification codes provided by their defector. Once aboard, they would navigate to the station's quantum stability control center and plant a cascade disruptor designed to trigger a controlled implosion of the stellar core, destroying the station without creating the catastrophic supernova effect it was designed to produce. "It's a precision operation," Alice told her team. "We'll have a 90-minute window from docking to detonation. After that, their security protocols will detect the anomalies in our credentials." "And our extraction plan?" Lieutenant Desai asked. Alice met her gaze steadily. "The Wraith will hold position at maximum stealth range. Once the disruptor is planted, we evacuate to the lower hangar bay and commandeer a maintenance vessel. The confusion from the initial system failures should cover our escape." What remained unspoken was the razor-thin margin for success. If anything went wrong, if their credentials were questioned, if the disruptor malfunctioned, if their escape route was compromised, the mission would fail, and Earth would remain under threat of annihilation. The infiltration team consisted of Alice, Ryan, Dr. Wei, and 3 Ghost Command specialists with expertise in quantum mechanics, Council security systems, and combat engineering. They spent 2 weeks in intensive preparation, memorizing station layouts and rehearsing every aspect of the operation until each movement became instinctual. The night before deployment, Alice found herself unable to sleep. She stood in the Wraith's observation deck, watching the distant glow of Essence Station against the backdrop of space. "Second thoughts?" Ryan asked, joining her at the viewport. "Not about the mission," she replied. "But I keep thinking about how we got here. A century of human expansion into the galaxy, playing by their rules, seeking peaceful integration. And it led to this. A weapon built to exterminate our species because we were too accommodating to be taken seriously, yet too potentially powerful to be allowed to develop." Ryan was silent for a long moment. "My grandfather used to say that true peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of justice. Maybe that's what we're really fighting for. Not just survival, but the right to exist as equals." Alice nodded, finding unexpected comfort in the perspective. "Then let's make sure we live to see that justice established." The mission began at 0600 hours ship time. The captured Draconid shuttle, designated Trojan, departed the Wraith with its identification transponders modified to match legitimate supply vessels. Alice occupied the pilot's seat, her hands steady on the controls, despite the tension coursing through her body. "Approaching outer sensor perimeter," she announced as they crossed the invisible boundary. "Prepare for identification challenge." The challenge came moments later, a standard security handshake, followed by a request for their authorization codes. Ryan transmitted the sequence they'd obtained from the defector, and there was a collective holding of breath as they waited for the response. "Supply vessel identified," came the controller's disinterested voice. "Proceed to docking bay 17 for cargo inspection." Phase 1 complete. Alice guided the shuttle toward the designated bay, using the approach to gather visual data on the station's external defenses. The nested rings were even more impressive up close, each one a marvel of engineering with its own propulsion and defensive systems. The docking procedure went smoothly, and they were met by a pair of Draconid security officers who barely glanced at their forged credentials before directing them to the cargo processing area. It seemed the triumvirate's confidence in their secrecy had made them complacent. "We have 85 minutes," Alice murmured, as they separated according to plan. She and Dr. Wei would proceed to the central control hub, while Ryan led the others to secure their escape route. The station's interior was a labyrinth of corridors and security checkpoints, each requiring different access protocols. They had anticipated most of these, but not the heightened alert status they encountered at level 37. "Something's wrong," Dr. Wei whispered, as they were forced to detour around a squad of heavily armed guards. "These security patterns don't match our intelligence." Alice checked her chronometer, 70 minutes remaining. "We adapt and overcome," she said firmly. "New route through the maintenance tunnels on level 40. The detour cost them precious minutes, and when they finally reached the Quantum Stability Control Center, they had barely 50 minutes left before their cover would be compromised. The control room was staffed by 3 Xandrian technicians, their translucent bodies glowing with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep concentration. Dr. Wei deployed a neurosuppression device, a non-lethal technology that would render the Xandrians unconscious without harming them. Alice had insisted on minimizing casualties throughout the operation. These technicians were not the architects of the weapon. They were simply doing their assigned tasks. With the control room secured, Dr. Wei connected their disruptor to the quantum stabilization matrix. The device was elegantly simple in concept. It would introduce a controlled frequency fluctuation into the containment fields, causing them to gradually degrade rather than catastrophically fail. Initiating disruptor sequence, he reported his fingers flying over the controls. Estimated time to critical destabilization, 47 minutes. Alice frowned. Their window for escape was narrowing. "Can we accelerate the process?" "Not without risking premature core collapse. The stellar fragment needs to be drawn back into controlled compression before it destabilizes. Otherwise..." An alarm cut through the air, its high-pitched wail echoing through the control center. On the monitors, red warning symbols flashed as security protocols activated throughout the station. "We've been compromised," Alice realized, reaching for her communicator. "Ryan status." "Our credentials were flagged at the hangar checkpoint," his strained voice replied. "We're pinned down near Maintenance Bay 12. Heavy security presence between us and the extraction point." Alice made a split-second decision. "Hold position! We'll come to you!" She turned to Dr. Wei. "Lock in the disruptor sequence. We need to move." "It's not fully calibrated," he protested. "If I lock it now, the destabilization could accelerate unpredictably." "We don't have a choice," Alice said grimly. "Lock it and set it to maximum stealth mode. We need time to evacuate." Dr. Wei complied, his movements quick and precise despite the pressure. "Done. But we have 30 minutes at most before critical failure, possibly less, if they detect the disruption and attempt countermeasures." They moved swiftly through the corridors, avoiding main thoroughfares as security teams rushed past. The station had entered full lockdown, with compartment doors sealing and non-essential personnel being evacuated to secure areas. Alice used this confusion to their advantage, blending with the crowds where possible and using service passages to bypass checkpoints. When they finally reached Maintenance Bay 12, they found Ryan and the others exchanging fire with a Draconid security team across an open loading area. One of their specialists was down a wound in his shoulder, being treated by Lieutenant Desai. "Situation," Alice demanded, taking cover beside Ryan. "They have the main exit covered," he replied, his voice tight. "We've identified an alternative through the waste reclamation system, but it's on the other side of that loading area. We'd be exposed for at least 15 seconds during the crossing." Alice checked the time, 23 minutes until estimated critical failure. We need a diversion. She surveyed their resources, mind racing through possibilities. Then her gaze fell on a storage area containing pressurized canisters of reactor coolant. There, she pointed. If we can rupture those tanks, the emergency protocols will trigger an environmental hazard alert. The automated systems will deploy containment fields, which would give us cover for the crossing. Rian nodded understanding immediately. But someone would need to get close enough to breach those tanks. Alice unholstered her particle disruptor. I'll do it. Get everyone ready to move the moment the containment fields activate. Before Ryan could protest, she was moving using the irregular architecture of the loading bay for cover as she made her way toward the storage area. A burst of weapons fire from the Draconids forced her to dive behind a cargo loader, so close to her target yet still exposed if she attempted to reach it. Covering fire in 3, Ryan's voice came through her communicator. 2, 1. A barrage of focused energy pulses erupted from her team's position, forcing the Draconids to take cover. Alice seized the moment, sprinting the final distance and firing 3 precise shots at the coolant tanks. The effect was instantaneous. A rush of supercooled gas erupted into the bay as alarms blared and emergency containment fields snapped into place, creating opaque energy barriers throughout the area. Move now, she ordered, already running back toward her team. They crossed the loading bay under cover of the containment fields, reaching the waste reclamation access point, just as station security began to regroup. The narrow maintenance tunnel beyond was designed for automated cleaning drones, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees through claustrophobic darkness. 16 minutes to critical failure, Dr. Wei reported as they emerged into a lower processing chamber. And I'm detecting power fluctuations in the containment rings. They've discovered our sabotage. The waste reclamation system led them to a service hangar containing maintenance shuttles, small utilitarian vessels designed for external hull repairs. They were slower and less maneuverable than proper escape craft, but they had one crucial advantage: they could be launched manually, without central computer authorization. Prepare for emergency departure, Alice ordered, as they boarded the shuttle. Lieutenant Desai took the pilot station, while Ryan helped their wounded specialist secure for launch. Dr. Wei, status update on the disruptor. The scientist connected to a data terminal, his expression growing increasingly concerned. They're attempting to stabilize the containment fields. They've slowed the degradation, but the fundamental quantum instability is still accelerating. Estimated time to critical failure now stands at 22 minutes. That was longer than expected, which meant they might still be within the blast radius when the station failed. Can you trigger the final sequence remotely? Dr. Wei shook his head. Not from here. We'd need to be much closer to the control center. Alice made another hard decision. Lieutenant, begin launch sequence. Ryan, get everyone secured. She turned back toward the hangar exit. Commander, Ryan called after her realization dawning in his eyes. You can't go back. Someone has to ensure the disruptor completes its sequence, she said firmly. Otherwise, this mission fails and Earth remains under threat. I'll go, Dr. Wei volunteered. I designed the disruptor. I can... No, Alice cut him off. You're needed to interpret the data and confirm destruction. I know enough about the system to trigger the final sequence. She met Ryan's gaze steadily. Hold position at minimum safe distance. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, depart without me. Before any further objections could be raised, she was moving back through the access tunnels and into the increasingly chaotic station. Security was focused on evacuation now, with commanders shouting orders as personnel rushed toward escape pods and shuttle bays. Alice moved against the flow, using her Ghost Command training to remain unnoticed amid the confusion. The journey back to the control center was a blur of narrow escapes and intuitive navigation. When she finally reached it, she found the room occupied by a team of senior Xandrian engineers, frantically working to stabilize the containment systems. She didn't hesitate. Her particle disruptor was set to stun, and she took them down with 4 precise shots. Then she turned to the control interface, finding the disruptor device still connected, but in standby mode, The Xandrians had managed to isolate it from the main systems. "Not good enough," she muttered, activating the secondary protocols Dr. Wei had installed. The disruptor hummed back to life, and on the status monitors, the containment field integrity immediately began to drop precipitously. Alice checked the time 11 minutes, until critical failure, and at least 8 minutes back to the maintenance shuttle. It would be close, too close, but still possible if she moved now. She was halfway to the door when the station shuddered violently. Status alerts flashed across every screen as the innermost containment ring reported catastrophic failure. The artificial gravity fluctuated, sending loose equipment floating momentarily before crashing back down. "Cascade failure in primary quantum stabilizers," an automated voice announced. "Evacuate immediately. Time to core collapse 7 minutes." The timeline had accelerated. Alice activated her communicator. "Ryan, the station is going critical ahead of schedule. Launch immediately and clear the blast radius." "What about you?" His voice came back thick with emotion. "I'll find another way out," she promised, already knowing the odds were against her. "That's an order, Major. Get our people to safety." There was a long pause before his response came. "Understood, Commander. It's been an honor." Alice didn't allow herself to dwell on the farewell. There were still evacuation pods near the command level. If she could reach one in time, she might survive. She raced through corridors now bathed in red emergency lighting, following the evacuation route markers, as the station continued to shudder around her. The evacuation bay was in chaos when she arrived, the last remaining officers, fighting for access to the final pods. Alice avoided the conflict, spotting an unattended emergency suit storage unit. The survival suits weren't designed for long-term vacuum exposure, but they included propulsion units. If she could clear the initial blast wave. 5 minutes to core collapse. Alice donned the suit with practiced efficiency, checking the oxygen supply and propulsion reserves. It would have to be enough. 4 minutes. She located an external airlock used for maintenance operations. The emergency override codes she'd memorized from the station schematics allowed her to bypass the lockdown protocols. 3 minutes. The airlock cycle seemed to take an eternity, the decompression process slowed by the station's failing power systems. 2 minutes. Finally in space, Alice activated the suit's propulsion unit at maximum output, putting as much distance as possible between herself and the doomed station. Behind her, the massive structure was visibly changing, the perfect synchronization of its rotating rings degrading as power fluctuations increased. 1 minute. The maintenance shuttle was nowhere in sight. Ryan had followed her orders to retreat to a safe distance. Alice continued her outward trajectory, knowing it wouldn't be enough, but refusing to surrender to despair. 30 seconds. The station's outermost ring suddenly detached, spinning away into space, as structural integrity failed. The inner rings followed in rapid succession, breaking apart, like a massive mechanical flower shedding its petals. 10 seconds. Alice closed her eyes, thinking of Earth, of blue oceans and green forests, and the civilization she had sworn to protect. Whatever happened next, she had fulfilled that oath. The explosion, when it came, was strangely beautiful. The stellar core fragment, finally released from its containment, did not detonate as a supernova, but instead collapsed in upon itself in a brilliant implosion of light and energy. The vacuum of space carried no sound, but Alice could feel the shockwave as it hit her suit, spinning her helplessly into the void. Systems failed one by one: propulsion, communications, environmental controls. As the oxygen level dropped, Alice found herself surprisingly at peace. The mission had succeeded. Essence Station was destroyed. Earth was safe. Her last conscious thought was of stars, countless points of light spinning around her as darkness claimed her vision. The beeping of medical equipment was her first sensation upon waking. For a moment, Alice believed she was dreaming, or perhaps experiencing some strange afterlife simulation. Then the pain hit a deep ache throughout her body that confirmed she was very much alive. "Welcome back, Commander," a familiar voice said. Ryan Silas sat beside her bed, his face showing the strain of sleepless nights, but his eyes bright with relief. "How?" She managed her throat dry and voice weak. "We never actually left," he admitted. "I couldn't follow that particular order. We tracked your suit's emergency beacon after the implosion and executed a recovery operation. It was challenging." Alice tried to sit up but found herself too weak. "The station." "Completely destroyed. No survivors among the triumvirate personnel. Dr. Wei confirms the stellar core fragment collapsed into a self-contained singularity that dissipated harmlessly." She processed this information slowly. "And the Council? Do they know it was us?" Ryan's expression shifted to something more complex. "That's where things get interesting. While you were recovering, events have been evolving rapidly." He activated a holographic display above her bed, showing news feeds from across the galaxy. The headlines were shocking. Triumvirate weapons program exposed. Council in crisis as elder races, implicated in illegal planet killer development. Calls for reorganization of galactic governance. The Lyrans released evidence of the Triumvirate's involvement in both Helion 7 and the Essence Station project, Ryan explained. Combined with the mysterious destruction of the station itself, it created a perfect storm. Half the Council species have withdrawn their ambassadors in protest, demanding a complete restructuring of galactic governance. "And Earth's position?" Alice asked. "Officially, we express shock and dismay at these revelations, while calling for a peaceful resolution to the crisis." Ryan's lips quirked in a small smile. "Unofficially, Admiral Novak sends her congratulations on a mission well executed." The recovery took weeks. As Alice regained her strength, she followed the political upheaval from her hospital bed aboard the Ghost Command carrier that had become their temporary base of operations. The Galactic Council was in disarray with the Triumvirate's influence shattered, and younger species demanding equal representation in whatever new structure emerged. Then came the most surprising development of all, a request for private talks with Earth's leadership, initiated by a coalition of moderate council species. The meeting would take place on neutral territory, with minimal delegations from each side. "They're asking for you specifically," Admiral Novak told Alice during her visit to the medical bay. "As Earth's representative." Alice frowned in confusion. "Me, I'm a military commander, not a diplomat." "Perhaps that's precisely why they want you," the Admiral suggested. "They know what happened, Alice. Not the details, but enough to understand that Earth was responsible for destroying Essence Station. They're not seeking diplomatic niceties, they want to negotiate with whoever actually holds Earth's power." The meeting took place aboard a Lyran diplomatic vessel in the Tau Ceti neutral zone. Alice, now recovered enough to stand without assistance, wore her formal Ghost Command uniform without concealment or apology. The insignia that had once been kept hidden was now prominently displayed, a declaration of humanity's true capabilities. The alien delegation consisted of representatives from 5 species, a Xandrian elder, an Arcturus prefect, a Syrian ambassador, a Lyran counselor, and surprisingly, a Draconid commander. They studied Alice with expressions ranging from caution to respect as she entered the conference chamber. Commander Vega, the Xandrian elder, began her translucent form, shifting with emotional bioluminescence. "We thank you for agreeing to this unusual dialogue." "I'm here to listen," Alice replied simply. The Arcturus prefect leaned forward. "Let us dispense with pretense. We know that Earth was responsible for the systematic campaign against Triumvirate assets, following the Helion 7 tragedy. We know it was your operatives who destroyed Essence Station." Alice met his gaze steadily. "And if that were true, then it would demonstrate that humanity possesses capabilities far beyond what you have allowed the galaxy to believe," the Syrian ambassador said. "It would suggest that your century of diplomatic compliance was strategic patience." "We played by the rules we were given," Alice countered. "We sought peaceful integration and fair treatment. It was the Triumvirate that chose violence first against our civilians, and then by developing a weapon capable of destroying our homeworld." The Draconid commander made a gesture of acknowledgement. The triumvirate believed they could eliminate potential rivals before they became threats. It is an ancient strategy, one that has preserved their dominance for millennia. What they failed to recognize was that humanity had already become a power worthy of respect. You had simply chosen not to demonstrate it. Until you were forced to take off the gloves, Kale the Lyran counselor added, with a gesture that approximated a human smile. The metaphor seemed to have spread throughout galactic discourse. Alice wondered briefly what future historians would make of it. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked, bringing the conversation back to its purpose. The Xandrian elder activated a holographic projection of a document titled The New Galactic Concordat. "We represent a coalition of species who believe the old council structure has failed," she explained. "The triumvirate's abuse of power has demonstrated the danger of concentrating authority among the oldest civilizations while marginalizing younger species. The new Concordat would establish equal voting rights for all member species," the Syrian ambassador continued. "No civilization would hold veto power over another regardless of their technological development or how long they've been spacefaring. And most importantly," Kale added, "it would include specific protections against aggression toward emerging species. What happened at Helion 7 would be classified as a war crime under these provisions." Alice studied the document carefully. It represented everything Earth had sought since joining the galactic community: recognition, equality, security. But one question remained. Why offer this now? Is it simply fear of what else humanity might be capable of? The alien representatives exchanged glances before the Draconid commander answered. "Fear is a factor," he admitted. "Your Ghost Command's operations demonstrated strategic and tactical capabilities that many believed impossible for such a young species. But it's not the only consideration. You showed restraint," the Xandrian elder elaborated. "Your strikes were precise, minimizing casualties, even when retaliating for the deaths of your own people. You destroyed a planet-killer weapon rather than seizing it. These are not the actions of a species that seeks dominance, merely one that demands respect. And that," Kyle concluded, "is the kind of civilization we wish to build a future with." The negotiations lasted for days, with Alice consulting regularly with Earth's leadership. The final agreement wasn't perfect. Compromises were made on both sides, but it established the framework for a more equitable galactic order. The new Galactic Concordat was officially ratified 3 months later in a ceremony attended by representatives from over 400 species. As Earth's newly appointed ambassador to the Concordat, Alice stood on the same platform where she had once watched from shadows as human diplomats were ignored. Now, alien representatives approached her with gestures of respect and offers of cooperation. "Quite a change from a year ago," Ryan commented as they surveyed the gathering. Recently promoted to colonel, he would be overseeing the transition of Ghost Command from a covert operation to an acknowledged part of Earth's defense structure. "The galaxy panicked when humans finally took the gloves off," Alice observed. "But perhaps that panic was necessary for real change." "Do you regret any of it?" he asked quietly. Alice thought of Helion 7, of the lives lost there, and during their subsequent campaign. She thought of the moments in her survival suit when she believed death was certain. She thought of the political upheaval still rippling through 1,000 worlds. "I regret that it was necessary," she said finally. "But given the same circumstances, I would make the same choices." A commotion at the entrance to the hall drew their attention. A delegation of Draconid officials was escorting a secure container toward the central platform. According to protocol, all weapons were forbidden in the Concordat chambers, which made the heavy security unusual. Kale approached his bioluminescence pulsing with concern. "You should know what they've brought," he said quietly. "It's a fragment from Essence Station recovered from the debris field after the destruction." Alice felt a chill run through her. "Is it dangerous?" "Not in its current state. But the technology could be reverse-engineered by those with sufficient knowledge. The Draconids are surrendering it to Joint Concordat control as a gesture of their commitment to the new order." As the container was placed in a specially prepared vault beneath the chamber floor, Alice couldn't help but wonder what other remnants of the station might have been recovered, and by whom. The triumvirate's influence had been broken, but individual members of the elder races still held positions of power throughout the galaxy. Not all would accept their diminished status gracefully. For now, however, peace prevailed. Earth had gained the recognition and respect it deserved, not through a century of diplomatic deference, but through the revelation of its true strength. Humanity had demonstrated both the will to fight when necessary and the wisdom to seek lasting peace. As the ceremony concluded, Alice found herself beside the Xandrian elder, who had helped negotiate the Concordat. "There is an old saying among my people," the elder said, her translucent form rippling with thoughtful colors. "We fear most what we do not understand, and respect most what we have learned to fear." Alice nodded in acknowledgement. "Humans have a similar saying, speak softly and carry a big stick." "An elegant philosophy," the Xandrian observed, "though perhaps incomplete in practice." "How so?" "Sometimes one must demonstrate the capacity of the stick not to dominate, but to establish genuine equality." The elder's bioluminescence shifted to patterns indicating profound respect. "Your species has taught the galaxy an important lesson, Commander Vega. True peace is not built on the suppression of power, but on its balanced expression." As Alice gazed out at the assembled representatives of 100 worlds' former enemies, now cautious allies, ancient civilizations, now equal partners with emergent species, she allowed herself to hope that the lesson would endure. Humanity had taken off its gloves, revealing not just the strength of its fist, but also the dexterity of its fingers, capable of both destruction and creation, war and peace. The galaxy had indeed panicked, but perhaps in that panic it had found a better path forward, one where respect replaced fear and cooperation replaced dominance. For now, at least, the gloves could remain off, not as a threat, but as an honest expression of humanity's true nature, with all its power and potential finally acknowledged among the stars.